Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a totally fascinating historical and philosophical breakdown of how we can actually find some individual agency and strategic focus in a society that is just completely unpredictable. If you've ever felt totally overwhelmed by the sheer scale of global chaos, or like all the institutions around us are breaking down, well, the material we are exploring today offers a really structured, totally unsentimental roadmap for moving forward. We're going to examine the tension between what we can control, what we absolutely can't, and how you can build a truly resilient personal strategy out of all of it.
So let's kick things off with a pretty massive question. How do we actually maintain our happiness and build a real game plan when the public institutions around us just seem to be crumbling? Seriously, when the world seems completely indifferent to our personal struggles, how do we keep moving forward instead of just, throwing our hands up and giving up? It's a profound question, and answering it means we have to take a hard look at both our psychological reactions and our everyday practical choices.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the weight of pessimism.
When a society goes through this endless roller coaster of high hopes followed by crushing disappointments, like we've seen historically with shifting political regimes, it breeds this heavy, almost paralyzing national pessimism. But here's the thing, pessimism isn't just a bad mood. It's fundamentally a reactive state that literally clouds our ability to see the future. It actively destroys our initiative to do anything. In fact, the source material defines pessimism as a strategy that literally stops you from having a strategy. It blinds us. A perfect real-world metaphor for this was the construction of a coastal bike path that completely failed to anticipate the natural crashing of ocean waves. It's tragic, but that's exactly what happens when a society stops planning for inevitable realities.
Now this is wild. As public institutions collapse, individual happiness actually rises. Wait, why? Well, because when people lose faith in a shared national project, they just retreat to their private spheres. The arena for happiness isn't the public square anymore. It shrinks down to the private home. People stop debating the future of the country and start focusing heavily on personal self-help, positive thinking, and just individual survival rather than collective progress.
Moving right along to Section 2, the scales of ethics.
It's kind of funny, right? An open, transparent democracy actually puts a spotlight on more ethical infractions than a closed system ever would, simply because it forces us to look at failures that used to be hidden in the dark. And when we look at those failures, we tend to separate everyday micro-corruption, like sneaking into a bus lane or using a fake doctor's note, from macro-corruption, like bankrupting whole state companies or stealing public funds. But they are completely tied together. The argument here is that a corrupt state simply does not exist alongside a perfectly ethical population. Those everyday shortcuts, they're basically the training ground for massive systemic failures.
Have you ever caught yourself complaining, "I just don't have the energy to work out," or "I didn't study enough for this"? Well, the speaker shares this brilliant piece of advice from his mother to combat our cultural habit of blaming external factors. Every problem that starts with "I" is yours. Whether we want to blame genetics, the economy, or the government, if the problem starts with "I," it belongs entirely to you. It's a huge wake-up call to drop the excuses and take back your personal agency.
But hold on, because just having strict ethics doesn't magically create a utopia. To put this into perspective, look at this striking statistic. Brazil's suicide rate sits around 9 per 100,000 people. Compare that to Japan's rate of 49. Japan is an incredibly ethical, transparent, and orderly society where even tiny infractions are super rare. And yet this high standard of ethics doesn't automatically equal personal joy. It proves that while a strong ethical foundation definitely prevents societal chaos, it's absolutely not the only ingredient for human happiness.
Which brings us to Section 3, the illusion of comfort.
Okay, our brains literally fight against our own growth, all because we are biologically hardwired to cling to the familiar. The explainer points to this really dark psychological reality, where political prisoners sometimes feared getting a new torturer more than they feared their usual one. It's a chilling example for sure, but it hits on a fundamental human truth. We will cling to any situation that feels predictable, even if it's completely miserable. We overwhelmingly prefer a known evil over the mere possibility of an unknown good. That is exactly why people stay in terrible jobs or toxic relationships. The predictability of the misery just feels safer than the chaos of change.
You've probably heard the old boiled frog analogy, right? Put a frog in water, slowly bring it to a boil, and it won't notice the gradual change until it perishes. But if you throw it straight into boiling water, it jumps out immediately to survive. Machiavelli tells us that slow stagnation goes totally unnoticed and leads straight to ruin. Sudden, sharp crises, though, they are actually vital. They completely shake us out of our illusion of comfort and force us to act, which is essential for forging really strong strategic leaders.
And look, no matter how hard we try, we absolutely cannot fully control the future. Consider this crazy historical fact. It took 100,000 men spending 20 solid years to build the Great Pyramid for the pharaoh Khufu. All of that effort just to ensure his eternal glory and the safety of his remains. And the result? The tomb was robbed in its very first year. Talk about a reality check. It's a profound reminder that trying to entirely control the future or completely shield ourselves from the unknown is just an impossible task. Let's pivot to Section 4, Strategy and Time.
So, if we can't completely control history or guarantee our legacy against thieves in time, we have to look at what we actually can control right now, our practical time management. First, evaluate your true capacity and limits. Be honest, know exactly how fast you read or how much sleep you actually need. Second, stop dividing your focus. Multitasking usually just destroys your productivity. Third, ruthlessly prioritize urgent tasks versus long-term goals. And finally, be entirely present in the current task. You have got to know your physical and mental limits before committing to deadlines, rather than just blindly saying yes to every single request to please other people.
But to actually execute those steps, you have to take out what the speaker calls your time assassins. We're talking endless social media scrolling, completely pointless messaging groups, suffering through zero objectivity in corporate meetings, or honestly, just being seduced by the sound of your own voice instead of getting straight to the point. You have to become your own bouncer against these daily distractions. Because constantly dividing your attention with irrelevant information, the speaker bluntly calls that the ultimate trait of a loser in the strategic game of life.
All right, let's tie this all together in Section 5, Virtù and Fortuna.
Let's look at a modern example of strategy completely falling off a cliff, using a framework from Machiavelli's The Prince. Remember the infamous Brazil-Germany World Cup match? Brazil was playing at home, completely leaning on their past successes, and they were utterly dismantled 7-1. Why did that happen? Because the apex of success is often a terrible counselor. When you are winning, you start to think you're invincible. A true strategic leader has to plan for when things completely collapse, rather than just coasting on yesterday's victories.
Machiavelli basically split the world into two forces. On one side, we have virtù. Now, this isn't virtue in the good guy moral sense. It's what you can actually control. Your skills, the languages you learn, your deliberate choices, and your strategies. On the flip side is fortuna, the stuff you absolutely do not control. Random accidents, the weather, the economy, or what other people decide to do. Our entire lives are built right on the tension between these two. For example, saving up your money and buying a new car. That's your virtue. But a taxi running a red light and smashing into that car 48 hours later, that, my friends, is pure fortuna.
Do you know who you are talking to? We've all heard somebody drop that line, right? This incredibly vain catchphrase is used by people who arrogantly think their status somehow protects them from the chaotic indifference of the world. It's a huge reminder that believing we are above the rules or somehow magically immune to fortuna is a massive trap. No amount of vanity or money is going to stop the rain from falling or a crisis from hitting.
So, what's the core takeaway of this entire explainer? It's all about how we navigate the curve of our lives. You can't just rely on fate or karma to save you, and you definitely have to acknowledge what escapes your control. You've got to take full, unblinking responsibility for your virtue, your personal effort, while totally avoiding that toxic modern illusion that you have the limitless capability to fix everything. Life isn't a vertical line of pure destiny where everything is pre-written, and it's not a horizontal line where you can achieve absolutely anything just by wishing for it. It is a complex, constantly negotiated curve between your disciplined effort and a wildly unpredictable world.
To wrap up this explainer, I'm going to leave you with a pretty provocative question. Knowing that the world is totally indifferent, and knowing what you now know about the balance between your virtue and the chaos of fortuna, what exact practical strategy are you putting into place today to arrive where you want to be 10 years from now? Don't let the pessimism stop you from strategizing. Take control of what is yours. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.